The Eight Immortals Travel East, Chapter 7.
Imagine making the ultimate sacrifice for your family, only to be told that your sacrifice basically makes you a traitor to your career.
Right, yeah.
And then the only acceptable punishment for that betrayal is, well, forfeiting your own right to exist.
Which is just incredibly dark.
Right. Today, we are looking at a 400-year-old text that traps its protagonist in exactly this kind of unwinnable nightmare.
Yeah, it really is a nightmare.
It's a scenario where doing the absolute right thing for one person mathematically guarantees you're going to completely devastate another. You know, you are forced into a position where every possible action just results in catastrophic failure.
And that's so tough because, we structure our entire modern understanding of morality around this assumption of solvability.
Oh, totally. Like, there's always a way out.
Right. We like to believe that if we just plan well enough or work hard enough or, care deeply enough, we can satisfy all of our obligations.
Yeah, we treat moral dilemmas like puzzles that have a correct answer hidden somewhere inside them.
Exactly. But the text we are diving into today completely shatters that illusion. It introduces a dilemma where effort and goodness are entirely divorced from a positive outcome.
Which is terrifying. So, to give you an overview, we are unpacking Chapter 7 of the classical Chinese text Journey to the East.
Yeah.
And the specific story we're examining is titled, Magic Elixir Brings the Dead Back to Life.
Which sounds very upbeat.
Right. If you just read that title, you might assume we are in for a very standard archetypal fantasy narrative. You hear magic elixir and you probably expect, ancient alchemy, supernatural thrillers, and a really straightforward hero's journey.
And, the supernatural elements are definitely present.
Mm-hmm.
We have spirit travel, a master who accidentally loses his physical body, a disciple pushed to the brink of insanity, and, well, literally magical medicine.
So all the classic tropes.
Yeah, but the brilliant deception of this text is that all of that magic acts as a Trojan horse.
Oh, I like that. A Trojan horse for what, exactly?
Well, the supernatural framework is really just a pressure cooker. It's a highly engineered set of circumstances designed to push the human mind to its absolute breaking point.
Right.
It's testing what happens when a person's moral compass is just shattered by circumstances completely out of their control.
And the story sets up these impossible constraints right away. So we're introduced to a master who we learn carries an iron crutch and a gourd.
Yes.
And he decides he needs to go on this intense spiritual journey, specifically sending his spirit out of his body to Mount Hua.
Right, spirit projection.
Exactly. So he leaves his physical body behind, entirely vulnerable, and gives his disciple Yangtze one single sacred directive: guard the body.
And we have to understand, in the context of classical spiritual traditions, leaving the physical body behind is an act of extreme vulnerability.
Because the body is just sitting there.
Exactly. The spirit is traveling, but the body remains tethered to the earthly realm. It's susceptible to decay, desecration, or just outright destruction.
So it's a huge deal.
Oh, massive. The duty placed on the disciple isn't just a favor, like feeding your cat. It is the ultimate test of loyalty. The master is literally placing his mortal existence in Yangtze's hands.
But of course, tragedy strikes while the master's spirit is away. The disciple accidentally destroys the master's physical body.
Which is the one thing he was told not to do.
Right. As a result, the master's returning spirit arrives from Mount Hua only to find he has no physical form to inhabit.
Yeah, he's basically locked out of his own life.
So he's forced to possess a completely new, entirely different body. And what's wild is that the text doesn't start with a dramatic confrontation between the newly bodied master and the disciple.
No, it doesn't.
It actually starts with the master's internal monologue right after he learns why his disciple failed to guard the body.
And that why is crucial. The master discovers that Yangtze abandoned his post because Yangtze's own mother had died.
Right.
And the master's internal reaction to this news completely subverts the hierarchical expectations of a classical master-disciple dynamic.
Totally. Because we might expect a master, upon finding his body destroyed by a subordinate, to seek, immediate righteous vengeance.
Or at the very least to demand some severe cosmic punishment. The disciple failed his one sacred duty.
Right, resulting in the loss of the master's original physical form. I look at that setup and think about the extreme power dynamics involved. If I entrust you with something incredibly valuable, even just my car or my home, and you completely destroy it, my immediate reaction is going to be anger.
That's human nature.
Yeah, the instinct is to assign blame directly to the person who failed the task.
But the master bypasses anger entirely. He just skips it and moves straight into this state of radical empathy.
It's honestly kind of shocking.
It is. His internal monologue is devastatingly profound. He reasons to himself, he failed to guard my body because he was forced by his mother's situation. He failed to give his mother a proper send-off because he was burdened by me.
Burdened by me. That phrasing stops me in my tracks every time.
It's so powerful.
He is the master. He is the victim of the material destruction. Yet he looks at the wreckage of his own physical body and immediately identifies the systemic trap that Yangzi was caught in.
Yeah.
He realizes that his own spiritual ambition built the snare his disciple stepped into.
Right. It introduces this concept of mutual burden. The master takes radical accountability.
Yeah.
He shifts the focus away from the material outcome, the destroyed body, and places it entirely on the impossible constraints placed on the disciple.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is huge.
Yeah. He recognizes that his decision to leave his body behind, his pursuit of higher spiritual cultivation, is the exact mechanism that inadvertently ruined his disciple's life. He created the conditions for Yangzi's failure.
It makes me think about how rare that kind of systemic accountability is even now. We have these intense debates about work-life balance, but they often ignore the reality of conflicting absolutes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, imagine a scenario where a senior executive demands an employee handle a make-or-break company crisis over the weekend.
Right, a classic high-pressure situation.
Yeah. Meanwhile, that employee experiences a catastrophic medical emergency at home. The employee tries to manage both, ends up failing to save the company deal, and isn't fully present for their family emergency either.
A total lose-lose.
Exactly. It is almost unheard of for the executive to step back and say, I am the reason you failed your family, and your family is the reason you failed me. The structure I put you in was the actual failure.
Because the person in power almost exclusively focuses on their own quantifiable loss.
Always.
But this master immediately diagnoses the moral paralysis of the disciple, and his conclusion is purely action-oriented.
Right. He doesn't just feel bad for him.
No, he realizes that if he doesn't personally intervene and resurrect the mother, the disciple will harbor lifelong regret. He doesn't sit and meditate on this realization. He picks up his iron crutch, grabs his gourd, and heads straight to the Yang household.
Which really challenges the stereotypical Western reading of Eastern spiritual texts.
How's that?
Well, we often encounter this flattened idea of the enlightened immortal as someone entirely detached from human drama. You know, someone sitting on a mountain peak, unbothered by the messy realities of grief and failure.
Yeah, that stoic, unfeeling depiction completely misses the core philosophy presented here.
Right.
True enlightenment in this text is not a cold detachment from human suffering. It is a heightened, almost agonizing sensitivity to it.
That's a great way to put it.
The master is not motivated by retrieving his old body or asserting his dominance over a failing subordinate. His primary driving motivation is the prevention of another person's lifelong regret.
Wow.
Yeah, the enlightened perspective is characterized by the ability to see the full, crushing context of someone else's failure and feeling compelled to heal it.
So the master sees the trap and moves to dismantle it. But he arrives at the disciple's house too late to prevent the emotional fallout.
He does, yeah.
The master, who is disguised in his newly possessed, unrecognizable body, walks into a scene of absolute, complete devastation. And the source material doesn't shy away from the visceral reality of Yangzi's pain.
Not at all. The text describes Yangzi wailing, choking back tears, stamping his feet, beating his chest, and weeping over his mother's coffin.
It's so intense.
It is a full-body manifestation of grief and failure, and most drastically, the master finds Yangzi actively trying to slit his own throat with a sword.
The master steps in to physically stop him, obviously, and asks a very practical question.
Right.
He essentially says, why are you resorting to suicide? There are standard mourning rituals for a parent. You have the coffin, you have the clothes, you have the burial site. You are performing the mourning rites. Why do you feel the need to add your own death to this tragedy?
And Yangzi, who still believes he is speaking to just a random traveler, explains the mechanics of his failure.
Yeah.
He details the master's spirit journey to Mount Hua and reveals the specific timeline he was given. He was ordered to guard the physical body for exactly 7 days.
The timeline is the mechanism of the true cruelty here. Yangzi didn't get bored and wander off on day 2. He didn't casually forget his duty.
No, he was right there.
On the 6th day, he received word that his mother was deathly ill.
The agony of day 6 is what elevates this story from a simple tragedy to a masterpiece of psychological tension.
Yes.
It was the sheer unbearable weight of almost making it. It was the eve of success. You can imagine the deep physical and mental exhaustion of those first 5 days, successfully maintaining absolute vigilance over the master's vulnerable form.
Oh, he must have been so tired.
And then, at the 11th hour, the universe forces his hand.
He is told his mother is dying, and he realizes he is out of time.
Yeah.
If he waits for day 7 to fulfill his duty to his master, his mother will die alone, and he will have failed in his ultimate duty as a son. But if he leaves immediately to be with his mother, he has to destroy his master's body to ensure it isn't desecrated by animals or thieves while he is gone.
Because he can no longer guard it.
Right. He is forced into the impossible choice. So he cremates the master's body to rush home. But then the universe twists the knife. When he arrives, his mother is already dead.
It is a total comprehensive collapse of his moral universe. He perceives himself as an absolute failure on every conceivable front.
Yeah, he lost both gambles.
Exactly. In the societal framework of his time, the 2 highest virtues a person can possibly embody are filial piety, which is the absolute duty to one's parents, and loyalty, the absolute duty to one's master or sovereign.
Right.
By attempting to serve both simultaneously, he has utterly failed both.
It's the ultimate Kobayashi Maru scenario. He tried to rewrite the rules of an unwinnable game, and in doing so, he managed to trigger every single fail state.
Yeah, he hit every landmine.
He destroyed the master's body, committing the ultimate act of disloyalty, and he still failed to comfort his mother in her final moments, committing the ultimate act of unfilial behavior.
And the text provides the precise language of his self-hatred and is really revealing of how deeply he has internalized these societal expectations.
What does he say?
Well, he calls himself a sinner against heaven and earth. He refers to himself as a useless waste in the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he states that he will be mocked by the masses in the present and shamed by gentlemen in the history books of the future.
I'm looking at this reaction, slitting his throat, and it feels completely disproportionate to a modern reader.
Right, because to us, he just missed a deadline and had an accident, basically.
Exactly. But he talks about balancing cosmic scales and the judgment of future history books, which tells me the text views these 2 duties not as mere tasks, but as the literal justification for his right to exist.
You've hit on the exact philosophical weight of the scene. In his mind, his very existence has become a monument to failure.
Yeah.
When you fail the 2 fundamental pillars of your society's moral code, you lose your right to occupy space within that society. He believes his life is an insult to the virtues he failed to uphold.
That is so heavy.
It is. If his body couldn't protect his master, and his spirit couldn't comfort his mother, then his body and spirit possess no inherent value. His death is an attempt to erase the error of his continued existence.
And the text perfectly validates how soul-crushing that specific dual failure feels. I mean, for you listening, anyone who has ever tried to juggle 2 massive conflicting responsibilities knows that hollow, sinking sensation.
Oh, for sure.
You stretch yourself to the breaking point trying to do the impossible, and when you inevitably drop both, society doesn't reward you for the difficulty of the attempt. Society just looks at the wreckage.
We've all experienced a day 6 moment where our best, most exhausting efforts are suddenly rendered meaningless by an unpredictable twist of fate.
Yeah, totally.
And so Yang Zi is ready to end his life over these perceived failures. He lifts the sword again. But the disguised master physically restrains him.
Right.
And then the master delivers a paradigm-shifting philosophical argument that completely redefines the rules of virtue.
Here's where it gets really interesting, really hits its core.
Yeah.
The master stops him and declares, loyalty and filial piety lie in the intent. He argues that because Yangzi's heart was so deeply and agonizingly committed to both his mother and his master, what Yangzi's calling unfaithful and unfilial is actually great loyalty and great filial piety.
Yes. The specific Chinese phrase used here is li jin, which translates to establishing the heart or setting the intention.
Li Shen.
The master is advocating for a radical separation of outcome from intention. If we connect this to the bigger picture, traditional societal structures, both ancient and modern, operate almost exclusively by judging outcomes.
They look at the final tally.
Exactly. Did the physical body of the master survive? Did you arrive before your mother passed away? Society asks binary questions based entirely on material results.
It's like a corporate scoreboard or a financial accounting ledger. The scoreboard doesn't care if your team played with incredible heart, or if 3 of your star players were injured, or if the referee made a bad call. The The scoreboard only records the final points. It only registers the external outcome.
And the master essentially walks over to the scoreboard and unplugs it.
I love that.
He argues that the true measure of virtue is not the external result, which is constantly subject to the chaotic, unpredictable whims of the universe. The true measure of virtue is the internal agony, the purity of the attempt, and the intent of the heart.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though. Intent is great. Establishing the heart is a beautiful concept. But at the end of the day, he still literally cremated his master.
He did.
He destroyed an irreplaceable physical form. Can a pure heart really act as a philosophical get-out-of-jail-free card for that kind of catastrophic material destruction?
And that tension, the tension between material consequence and internal grace, is the absolute genius of the text. Does intention magically erase consequence?
Right, does it?
Well, if we examine the master's exact argument, he isn't claiming that the action of burning the body was good. He isn't saying cremating me was actually the correct choice. What he is arguing is that the soul of the actor remains pure because of the impossible constraints they were operating under.
So it's not about pretending the mistake didn't happen. It's about saving the humanity of the person who made it.
Exactly. It is a profound mechanism of grace. The master is telling Yangzi that a person is not defined by the unwinnable situations the universe throws at them.
Yeah.
They are defined by the state of their heart when they are trapped inside those situations. The fact that Yangzi is in such profound agony, the fact that his guilt is driving him to the brink of suicide, is the very proof that his heart is perfectly aligned with loyalty and filial piety.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
Right. A truly disloyal person wouldn't be weeping over the coffin. They would be making excuses or rationalizing their behavior.
The agony itself is the proof of the virtue. If he didn't care, it wouldn't hurt. By validating that pain, the master offers Yangzi incredible philosophical salvation.
He really does.
He heals Yangzi's mind and pulls him back from the brink of self-destruction. But, having offered spiritual salvation, the master then pivots to offer literal physical salvation to the mother.
Yes. He shifts from a philosopher diagnosing the soul to a miracle worker altering physical reality.
Right.
Maintaining his disguise as a random traveler, he tells Yangzi that he recently met a strange person who gave him a magic elixir, a Ling Dan.
Ling Dan.
But he establishes a crucial condition. This elixir can only be given to a good person.
Ah, okay.
And after hearing Yangzi's agonizing story and witnessing the purity of his intent, the traveler decrees that Yangzi has proven himself to be a good person.
Yangzi drops to his knees immediately and begs for the medicine. And the way the text describes the administration of this magic pill is fascinating.
Very grounded.
Yeah. The master takes the pill from his gourd, mixes it with water, and pours it directly into the dead mother's mouth.
The sensory grounded details of the resurrection really highlight the biological reality of the miracle. It is not a wave of a magic wand or an ethereal spell spoken into the air.
Right, no sparks flying.
It involves a gourd, a pill, and water. Basically a recognizable medical procedure. The physical resurrection itself is described viscerally. The text says she catches her breath, her face flushes red, she lets out a long sigh, and wakes up as if she had never been sick at all.
The long sigh grounds the magic in such a relatable human experience. You can picture the sudden rush of oxygen, the color flooding back into her skin.
Yeah, it feels incredibly tangible.
Naturally, the family is completely stunned. They are overjoyed, bowing, offering their endless thanks to this stranger, and they finally ask for his identity.
And this triggers the grand reveal. The traveler simply states, "I am your master."
Oh my gosh. The emotional whiplash for Yangzi in that moment must have been staggering.
Oh, absolutely paralyzing. The master explains the entire sequence of events. He explains that he possessed another body because his original form was destroyed. But the most crucial element of his reveal is his admission of why he came. He openly admits to Yangzi that he came specifically because he feared Yangzi would harbor a grievance or resent him over the mother's death.
That level of emotional transparency from an immortal being is stunning.
It's unheard of.
He possesses the power to bring the dead back to life, yet he openly confesses his own vulnerability to his subordinate. He essentially says, "I was worried you would blame me."
Yeah.
It's like an extreme version of an undercover evaluation, right? Like undercover boss.
Hmm.
By hiding his true identity, the master got to hear Yangzi's raw, unvarnished guilt and sorrow.
Exactly.
If he had shown up as the authoritative master from the beginning, Yangzi would likely have been paralyzed by the terror of divine punishment.
The disguise was absolutely necessary for psychological safety. The master needed to evaluate the true state of Yangzi's heart, but he also needed Yangzi to articulate his internal state without the distorting fear of retribution. He needed the confession to be pure.
He ensured Yangzi felt seen, understood, and morally validated before he ever performed the physical miracle. He healed the emotional trauma of day 6 before he healed the physical death of the mother.
And that reveals the text's hierarchy of suffering. The master views the spiritual agony and the shattered moral compass of his disciple as a far greater tragedy than the physical death of the mother.
Wow, so the soul must be secured before the body is repaired.
Exactly.
So the immediate crisis is completely resolved. The mother's face is flushed, she's taking deep sighs, she's alive. The disciple is forgiven. His crushing guilt has been washed away by philosophical grace.
A happy ending, right?
You would think. The unwinnable dilemma has been untangled by a literal miracle. But the narrative refuses to end there. It introduces a massive temporal shift that completely changes the scope of the story.
Yeah, the story transitions from an acute, localized crisis to a very long-term, century-spanning resolution.
200 years.
Right. It shifts its focus to the lingering, unavoidable tension between earthly life, our mundane human obligations, and ultimate spiritual ascendance.
So the master looks at Yangzi and says, "Your mother is fine now. Go fulfill your duty. Care for her until the end of her life."
Yeah.
And then he gives Yangzi a second pill. He instructs him, "Take this to prolong your life. We will meet again." And with that final instruction, the master turns into a gust of clear wind and vanishes.
What's fascinating here is how this sequence emphasizes the inescapable nature of duty and the necessity of delayed gratification.
Yeah.
The master clearly possesses the power to resurrect the dead and dissolve into the wind.
Mm-hmm.
He could easily whisk Yangzi off to the heavens right then and there.
Right, why not just take him?
He could say, "You passed the ultimate test of intention, your heart is pure, let's ascend." But he refuses to offer a shortcut.
He forces Yangzi to live out the heavy, mundane reality of the earthly duty he claimed to revere.
Exactly. Yangzi must fully execute the filial piety that his heart was committed to. He must actually do the daily, exhausting work of caring for an aging parent. The text posits that spiritual graduation cannot occur until the human obligations are fully, thoroughly satisfied. The soul cannot ascend if it leaves unpaid debts on earth.
And Yangzi does exactly that. He cares for his mother until she naturally passes away. After her death, he travels to the exact location where his master used to cultivate his spirit, and he begins his own rigorous cultivation.
Yeah.
And the text notes that 200 years later, the master who is identified finally as Iron Crush Li returns. He guides Yangzi, and they ascend to immortality together.
The provision of the second pill is just a beautiful narrative device.
Isn't it?
It isn't merely a health supplement. It is a physical manifestation of a promise. It is the master stating, "I see your potential. I know your required path is going to be incredibly long, but I will wait for you."
Yeah.
The pill provides Yangzi with the physical endurance necessary to fulfill his exhausting earthly duties and then survive the waiting period for his spiritual reward.
I'm fascinated by the timeline, though. 200 years is an incredibly long time to wait for a promotion.
It really is.
Why does the text require such a massive time jump? Why couldn't Yangzi simply begin his immortal life the day after his mother eventually passed away?
The 200-year span speaks directly to the internal mechanics of spiritual cultivation, as understood by the text. It suggests that true enlightenment cannot be rushed, and more importantly, it cannot be weaponized as an escape hatch from human responsibilities.
I see.
If Yangzi had achieved immortality immediately, the profound commitment he demonstrated during the agony of day 6 wouldn't have had the necessary temporal space to truly manifest and harden into wisdom.
So the paths of earthly duty and spiritual cultivation couldn't be walked simultaneously.
No.
They had to be entirely sequential. You master the human condition, you pay your debts to your family, and only then do you have the foundational stability to handle immortality.
Precisely. The 2 centuries represent the sheer weight, patience, and physical endurance required for true cultivation. It stands in stark contrast to any modern concept of cheap, easy, or instantaneous enlightenment.
Oh, for sure.
The physical limits of the human body must be stretched across centuries to properly prepare the eternal nature of the soul.